Welcome to our continued coverage of the NHL Trade Deadline here on the fourth period, presented to you by our good friends over at CCM Hockey. That's Anthony DeMarco and Dennis Bernstein. I'm David Pagnotta. And boys, we had a little bit of activity to wrap up this work week. Let's see if things can get percolated over the course of the weekend and going into the week. Some news obviously coming out this morning. Elias Pettersson signing his 8-year extension with the Vancouver Canucks. We hear about Evgeny Kuznetsov being placed on waivers, and his time in Washington's pretty much over. Let's start in Philly. And we know contract negotiations have picked up steam in the last, looking at the clock here, last 30 hours, let's say, with respect to Sean Walker's camp. Anthony, any new information there?
Well, I think this really got the ball moving when you saw Chris Tanev move on Wednesday night, then Ilya Lyubushkin moves to the Toronto Maple Leafs the following day. And obviously, teams are still circling on Sean Walker and also to a slightly lesser extent, Nick Seeler. But I think for the Flyers, they're still sitting tight. Like, I spoke to someone with the Flyers earlier, and they don't think that the pressure point has quite hit yet for interested teams on Walker and Seeler. So obviously we know that the Edmonton Oilers are still in the mix. The Toronto Maple Leafs are still circling. We know Tampa Bay is looking for a defenseman in some capacity, but would they want to spend assets on a rental, which they've been reluctant to do in the past? So it feels like we're maybe back in a little bit of a holding pattern with Sealer and Walker, but I would expect things to pick up next week as teams looking to add to their blue line get pressed up against the deadline coming next Friday.
And I wonder if maybe we even see that extension take place. We know that, as we said, contract negotiations have picked up steam, at least on Walker's side of things. Philly having some other, kind of balls up in the air with potential. And maybe a backup goalie.
Yeah, it seems that the Flyers are at least keeping that door open. Obviously, Carter Hart is on an indefinite leave of absence for the team, and they got full cap relief for him. The Cal Peterson experiment did not work. He was waived earlier in the week and assigned to the Lehigh Valley Phantoms. Felix Sandstrom expected to get to the start tonight against the Ottawa Senators. But the Flyers aren't prepared to spend a major asset for a backup goaltender. But if one could be had on the waiver wire or potentially via like a late round pick, a 6th round pick, it's certainly something they're keeping their eyes open for. Obviously, the pickings are slim for backup goalies around the league, and you have to make sure that any person coming in would be an upgrade on a Felix Sandstrom or a Cal Peterson. But certainly something that Danny Briere and the rest of the Flyers front office is keeping open to a possible addition before the trade deadline.
We know the Montreal Canadiens have had a goaltender for a while,
Yeah.
DB, in Jake Allen. Um, Not a fit for Philadelphia, but an option for some other teams. He has another year left on his contract. We have Jake Allen, DB. We've got David Savard. Yoel
Mhm.
Armia's name is out there. Tanner Pearson's name is out there. Josh Anderson's name has resurfaced again. What do you think happens out of the Quebec and with the Montreal Canadiens?
Well, one thing's for certain, Dave. With less than a week to go on the trade deadline, everybody's working around the clock because Vancouver put out that release at 7 a.m. Pacific and did a presser at 9:30 a.m. So could we get announcements at 1 a.m. or something like that? Yeah, we probably
Yeah.
could. But all kidding aside, the one guy that makes a lot of sense for teams would be David Savard, like right-handed shot defenseman. You know, I'm going to go to Edmonton, right? Can they get back? Could they send back CC and plus for David Savard? He'd be a perfect fit. He's done it before. Was traded to Tampa Bay Lightning a couple seasons ago. So that's the one player. The other players, there's turned to their deals, Dave. So to fit them in right now, 6 days away from the trade deadline, I'm highly suspect that they can do that. But certainly David Savard is going to have multiple interest from multiple teams. And if Kent Hughes is smart, I think that's the guy you wheel here on March 8th.
Yeah, it looks like the Canadiens won a first-round pick as part of any return for David Savard in this. Again, another year on his deal, and no trade protection. So whatever deal falls into place, Kent Hughes can kind of pounce on that one. You mentioned, actually both of you, in separate scenarios, David Savard and Sean Walker mentioning the Edmonton Oilers. And we know the Oilers have been looking for upgrades both on the blue line and up front. If they can get somebody in their middle six and also round out their decor with one, even two guys on the blue line, that's something that they would like to do. Kenny Holland, Jeff Jackson, and the rest of the company out in Edmonton are looking at a variety of different options at both ends. We know about Adam Henrique and the interest there in Anaheim. We know about Pavel Buchnevich and them poking around, and so is Vegas and maybe even the Rangers now looking at them, as well as Frank Vetrano in Anaheim. The Edmonton Oilers, a lot of different options in place right now as they continue to look to deepen this roster to go on a bit of a run. One thing they did explore, guys, they looked at moving Jack Campbell. They have for some time. They reinvigorated those conversations, I guess, recently. But right now, doesn't seem like there's that option. So if they're going to move out money, names like Brett Kulak, Cody Ceci, Warren Fogle, the possible suspects there. And I want to touch on the Minnesota Wild for a quick second. They're still in that race. They're not trading Marc-Andre Fleury. We know that Pat Maroon is done until at least after the deadline, so the likelihood of him getting moved is slim. But they have other options, apparently.
Yeah, for Bill Guerin and the Minnesota Wild, they have fallen a bit behind the eight ball here for that chase for the final wild card spot in the Western Conference, competing with the likes of the Blues, the Calgary Flames, the Nashville Predators, who are currently in a playoff picture. But I think it's going to be a relatively quiet deadline for the Minnesota Wild, but I would expect them to get at least some form of business done ahead of the trade deadline. I'm told that all their UFAs are up for grabs. They're not going to be looking to add pieces to try and get into the playoffs. And even a guy who's a pending RFA by the name of Dewar is a guy that I think that could be on the market for the Minnesota Wild. So for me, I think watch for Minnesota to just dangle their pending UFAs, not necessarily shop them, but open for business. And as you mentioned, Marc-Andre Fleury isn't going to be in the mix. Alex Goligoski is not going to be on the move as he has trade protection and has given no indication that he wants to leave. But I do expect that the Minnesota Wild will at least send some players out the door to bring in some assets before the March 8th trade deadline.
If we didn't want to complicate things in the defensive market, guys, then I guess we shouldn't talk about Ivan Provorov. But since he is out there, DB, another guy, a left shot defenseman, 1 year left on his contract, sounds cap hit. And the Columbus Blue Jackets could retain a little bit more. LA, because of that summer three-way trade,
right,
eating a good chunk of it. But he could be an option for teams looking for a guy with at least 1 more year left on his deal.
Yeah, and look, I'm sure he wants to get out of Columbus, Dave, right? I mean, what's going on in Columbus right now? So could he help a contender right now? Would it probably be like a three-way deal, which we're starting to see, like multiple three-way deals here, even cost you a fourth-round pick for a little bit more retention? But Provorov, look, put him on a contending team. I think his game would certainly elevate from what we've seen in Columbus. So I wouldn't be shocked if by March 8th, even though that's under the radar right now with Provorov, he could be an option for some contenders as well.
Yeah, look out for Tampa. They like their guys that have term. Even maybe the Florida Panthers. They're exploring their market a little bit and their reach a little bit on the defensive side of things with some guys, and Noah Hannafin, another player on their radar. So a lot going on. It's only Saturday. We got 6 days to go until the trade deadline. We'll be back tomorrow with more coverage here of the trade deadline presented by CCM Hockey. That's Dennis Bernstein and Anthony DeMarco. I'm Dave Pagnotta. See you tomorrow.